my name is Paul Casey and I'm going to take you through how to change a drum head today. I'm working on a 12-inch Yamaha drum set tom, but the basics that we're going to cover today is essentially the same for no matter what type of drum you're going to be changing. Before you start, you're going to need a drum key, a new drum head, a pair of drumsticks to check the tuning, and if you can, some sort of grease so that you can re-grease all of the tension rods so that we don't get any binding when we start tuning. I've already loosened the drum head with the drum key, taking these out, making it loose, so now this whole thing pops off. We can take the old head and discard it, but before we go to change the head, you want to do a couple things. You want to check the tension rods, which are the little screws that go in here. Make sure that they're free of dirt, make sure they're clean, and if they feel a little dry, you want to put a little bit of that grease on there. Not a lot, a little bit goes a long way. The next thing you want to do is check all of the lug casings. Again, check them for dirt, make sure that there's enough grease in there so that you're not going to get bound up. Then you want to make sure, take a nice rag, this one's in pristine condition, but take a rag if it's dirty, and clean out all around the shell here and on the bearing edge, which is the little part of the shell that angles in. Once all of that is clean, you can start putting on the new head. Depending on how picky you are, the logo placement could be a big deal. For me, I'm picky. So what I like to do is I like to line up the logo with the bottom head with the logo with the top head. So just put the crown for Remo drum heads right in the same spot. And then we're going to seat the rim back on the head. And before we get into putting anything back together or tightening anything, you want to make sure that the rim is what we call round. So make sure that there's no gaps or uneven gaps from around the drum. If it's too open on one side, it's not going to tune the same way all the way around. Again, this is a great drum, great head, so we're all squared away and ready to go. So the next step you want to take is put all the tension rods back in to what we call finger tight. That's not meaning to say as hard as you possibly can with your fingers, just to the point where the tension rod stops at the shell. Then this is a trick I learned from some LA studio guys a long time ago, and how to get your head in round. Basically, the most important part of changing the drum head is making sure that each point of the tension rod is going to be evenly tensioned. Because shells sometimes are a little different, sometimes rims are a little bit different, sometimes heads are a little bit different. You need to find the midpoint and balance all of it before we start bringing the pitch up. So what was taught to me is you make a fist, gentle fist, put it in the center of the drum head, and you'll create wrinkles, which you may or may not be able to see. And then your first step is just tune those wrinkles out. So you're not going to go very far, just until they disappear. And I'm not putting a lot of pressure on this arm, I'm not pushing hard, it's just the weight of my arm, just to get enough wrinkles all the way around the head so I can help start tuning those out. It looks like we're pretty close. You can test before with your stick, you can always do this with your fingers too, and now what you want to do is check. You want to tap about a ½ inch to an inch away, depending on the size of the drum, from where the tension rod is on the head. You can hear there's only one set of tension rods, one pair, that's out, and almost always that's how it works. So almost everything's in round except for two. Give those two a little bit of a tweak. A little bit more tweak right there. So now we've got it close. Depending on the drum, it might be the right pitch already. For drum set and kick drums and anything like that, a lot of times we like a little bit of a lower tone to the head. So you don't want to put a whole lot of tension around it because it gets tinny and bright and sounds a little weird. For this drum right here, I'm pretty happy with where that tone is. Nice, good overtones, it's warm, it has a good attack but not too heavy. This is perfect for like a good jazz band environment where you're going to be playing anything from swing to funk, to maybe even a rock tune or two. This is a good pitch and a good fundamental sound for this size drum. And that's about it. That's easy. If you want the head higher or lower, the only thing you need to do now is go back around the drum. And you'll notice when I'm tuning, I do them in pairs. So if I do this lug, I'm going to do the neighbor across the drum. Go around like you're going around a clock. Same thing. Do it all the way around the drum until you get back to where you started. If you notice, I kept my finger on the lug I started on so that I can remember. And now the drum's a little bit higher. If you want that a little lower, you can do the same exact thing, just righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. But even amounts all the way around, and a little bit goes a long way when you're tuning. Most drum tension rods have 4 sides on them, so you can see what your quarter turn would be or your half turn would be. So most of the time, I'm doing quarter turns or less when I'm tuning a drum. So now it's a little bit lower. That's about where we started with it, and that's about it. It's pretty easy to do. Just remember, clean, grease, get it in round, and then tune it how you like it. The top head in place. On toms and snare drums, you're going to have a second, and actually kick drums, you're going to have a second head, which we call the resonant side head. We just call them bottom heads because that would be the top, that would be the bottom side you don't hit. Changing the head and tuning the head is exactly the same as you would with the top. However, depending on what type of sound you want from your drum, you're going to manipulate this head tuning-wise a little bit differently. For snare drums, oftentimes the bottom head or the snare side head is going to be higher pitched than the top head. It gives you a better snare response and a little bit more pop when you're playing rim shots and being a little louder. Personally, for toms, I like to have the bottom head just a tiny bit higher. It gives a little bit more resonance than if they're lower. So we're going to play a little bit. I'm going to detune this bottom head, same drum we were just working on, so we can hear some differences. So I just detuned. You can kind of hear some not happy overtones, just a little growly, rather than singing like we had it before. So if you want to take that pitch up, I'm just going to check real quick, make sure I didn't go too far. Oftentimes the bottom heads are thinner than the top heads too, so that's a consideration when you're tuning as well. If you're using the same type of head, putting them in unison or matching the pitch exactly the same is going to give you a really big, wide open sound. If it's thinner, going a little bit higher is going to do that same effect for you. Now you can get that growl out a little bit. I'm going to go a little bit higher so you can hear what the other side of the spectrum sounds like too. Change the pitch at all on the top of the head. If you go back and rewind a little bit, you're going to hear the drum sound completely different from each tuning phase. This one is brighter, has a longer sustain, but it's a more pleasant tone. And when you got to remember when you're tuning drums and you're playing drums and you're in an acoustic environment, that sound needs to project. So when you stand over the top of the drum and you think, hey, maybe this is a little ringy, have a friend sit behind the drum set and play the toms or play the snare drum or whatever it is, and you walk away, give it 10 feet, and it will change the sound. It'll sound completely different. This drum from 10 feet away sounds completely different than when you're standing over it. And while it's a little ringy now, 10 feet away it sounds perfect. It sounds just like you would hear it on a record.